Welcome back to the Catholic Founders Podcast, where we are figuring out how to fully integrate our faith into our businesses so that we can become powerful instruments of God's will in the world. It's a mouthful, but that's what we're up to. All right, today we've got a fun show for you. Our guest is Joe Coleman, the founder of St. Kolbe Studios, a podcast production agency that can help you launch a podcast or drastically improve the existing podcast you have. I will say at the start of my journey with Catholic Founders, I ended up paying Joe for a consultation to show me what I could improve on my show. And I can say wholeheartedly that even after over 4 years of podcasting, the tips and advice and just everything that he gave me at least doubled the quality of output of the show, of my production, my production experience. So I would say he's somebody who's genuinely very good at his craft and cares deeply about making good and beautiful things. So I would definitely encourage you to reach out to him. Today's conversation is very wide ranging, from what's missing in Catholic media to understanding our unique calling from God. And we also talked a little bit about grappling with our relationship to money and hustle, especially as providers for our families. And of course, we did get a little bit of some interesting takes on podcasting. So there's a lot more than that. It's full of a lot of different interesting things. I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Before we do get started, if you enjoy the show, if you're a returning listener or a first-time listener, please give us 5 stars on your favorite podcast player. Consider it a little bit of an almsgiving for the value that you get out of the pod, the people that you meet through the podcast, all of those things. There's a little bit of value there, so consider it a bit of an almsgiving. And if you're feeling extra generous with that almsgiving, please share the show on social media or directly with some of your friends who are Catholic entrepreneurs. We're always trying to grow the reach, and we can only do it with your help. So thank you for doing that. Without any further delay, let's enjoy the show. Joe, how's it going? Welcome to the podcast.
Good, good. Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah, man, I'm super hyped to have you on my improved podcast that you helped me, make better in my production quality. So I owe you a lot,
Happy
I
to help.
think. Yeah, absolutely, man. Well, obviously I know you a little bit here. We've known each other for what, 7 months or something like that. But yeah, tell people who are not familiar who you are and what you're up to today.
Yeah, I run an audio production agency called St. Kolbe Studios, primarily a podcast production agency for Catholic podcasters, business owners, anyone who has a podcast or wants to. Disclaimer up front, I am in my home studio. We just had a baby about a month ago, so I'm probably not sounding great. I say that because if I sound awful and I'm telling you that you should let me edit your podcast, there's a disconnect here. So I'm not on my fancy studio. So whatever this sounds like, I apologize for it. But yeah, I run an operation called St. Kolbe Studios. We're a Catholic podcast production agency, and we've been running for better part of the last year at this point. I was an audio producer for radio as well as a freelance audio producer for a number of years. I started in about 2019. So I've been doing this in one form or another for about the last 6 years, but St. Kolbe Studios sort of as a culmination of the work I've been doing is a year-ish old, a little under. But yeah, that's what I do.
What really convinced you to start this? Like, I can't remember if we ended up talking through the founding story when we first met, but what led you to actually start your own business?
Yeah, I mean, I've been self-employed for most of my career at this point. I've worked for some other people, but it was one of those things. Long story short, I was a freelance writer for a number of years. 2023, I think, happened, and when the economy started to turn down and people started to outsource. Jasper AI was a big thing back then. I don't know if it ever made it, but people started to outsource to AI. They started to cut down their. I was mostly a blog writer, content writing, things like that. A lot of their budgets got cut, and at the time, I think I do fine now, just because I've got a few more years under my belt. But at the time, I didn't quite know how to adjust on the fly, so I lost a decent portion of my income. I happened to get a pretty good job offer locally to do content writing at a marketing agency, do it in-house, and that was not for me. It was, good people, good work, but it's one of those things. I think some people are just wired to work for themselves, and they can't really work for somebody else. We had a designer early on in my career there who left for the exact same reason. She was a freelancer, came in for a while, it didn't work, and I ended up being the same way. Yeah, I worked for somebody, and then that didn't work out. I took a sales job for a short term doing ad sales, and I figured, if I can't do this is the most freedom I'm going to have in a W-2 job. I got pretty much complete and total freedom to just make money how I see fit. If I can't do this, then I have to go back to working for myself. And, I couldn't do it. It was, again, good people, good work. I liked the office. It was a solid sales team, but it wasn't a fit. And I think those with the entrepreneurial spirit will sort of understand what I'm saying here. I think I combined, honestly, my dad ran his own business. His dad ran his own business. I think his dad did too. Like, it's kind of generational. I'm the first one not to run a brick and mortar but I'm also the first one to do it in the internet age, or at least to start my career in the internet age.
Yeah.
I realized that it just made me sad working for somebody else, even though it was good work, good people, and there was no reason to. It just didn't. There was a certain drive missing, I think, or maybe a certain point to it. And my wife, my wonderful wife, was like, "Hey, you can just quit. Like, it's fine. We'll figure it out. We'll have less money, but it's fine. You can just do it." And I was like, I hope you're serious, because I did. I took you up on that. You said I could, and then I think maybe a week later or so, I came back and I was like, I hope you're serious. And she wasn't, which is great. But and then I needed to do something. I had some good connects here, and I kind of just started freelancing, kind of piecing things together that eventually became St. Kolbe Studios. But it sort of just happened to me almost. It wasn't like, God came down from Mount Sinai and told me to start a podcast production agency. Like most things for, things of God. Yeah. For most people are just like, you kind of feel like you should do it. And then you give it a shot and it kind of works. And you go, okay, well, should I keep doing this? And it kind of keeps working, and just nothing ever fails. At the bottom never falls out. So you just sort of do it. God's more in the, I think, the still small whisper than the roaring wind or whatever the scripture verse is. And that's really how it was for me. It was like, okay, I think I should do this. I know I can. This seems like a good thing to do. I've made some money off of it. I could probably still do it. God, if you don't want me to, that's fine, but you got to just shut me down. I'm completely open to it. You got to do that. Otherwise, I'm just not going to know. And, the Lord never shut us down. So here we are.
Yeah. Now, I think that's a not uncommon story, right? Like having this kind of slow, kind of dragging along start, and then you eventually start to clarify what you're trying to build and everything as you go into the business world. And I also like the idea that I think a lot of people forget that most people who were self-employed for most of history, we always were doing our own thing to an extent, right?
Yeah.
I was having a discussion with my friend Dan the other day about this, and there's a lot of fulfillment, right? And plus, most corporate companies, even when they have a decent mission behind them, it's really hard to keep people motivated because they're just not, it's not your own thing. There's no ownership. There's no sense of ownership, right?
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. That was kind of the conclusion I came to as well, of there's nothing wrong with this. It's just not mine. And I think to some degree, it's great. And to some degree, it can be a failing, I think, of not sort of docility of spirit and not kind of submitting to just, this is the reality I'm dealt and I need to deal with it. I think there's a negative excess to people who are entrepreneurs, at least a potential one, not inherently, but at least a potential of, you hear stories of dudes I haven't turned a profit. I've been working on this for 2 years and we're running out of savings and I've got 3 kids. And it's stop. You need to go work for somebody else. But if that's not the case for you, great, do it. And luckily it wasn't the case for me, which, we had enough savings and we hadn't had our daughter yet. I was maybe a month in, 6 weeks in. I come home for lunch one day and my wife's just like, I'm pregnant. And I go, okay. And I pretty much just turned around and was like, I need to go make more money. And that's kind of how it started. And we haven't starved yet. The kid's still in diapers, so we're doing all right.
Yeah, nice. How did expecting your first really kind of change your I guess you say relationship with work and with hustle?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've kind of had an interesting go of it in that I think for a lot of guys, it's not a panic quite so much as it's a fire is really lit under you and you're like, I have to go, 16 hours a day. I just can't stop because I need to make this money. My thing was always I just feel like it's going to work out. I'm going to put in the hours, I'm going to do it. But I'd seen consistent growth at a small scale, but it had been consistent. And I went, this works. What I'm doing works. And if I just keep doing it and I just keep doing more of it, odds are, from everything I've seen, it's just gonna work fine. And it did. So it was almost this weird, well, it's not weird, I'm sure it's divine, peace of no, I just think this is going to work out. And I don't quite know why, but I just have this strong feeling that like, if I just keep at it and just kind of keep plugging away, working hard, looking out for opportunities, it's going to be fine. I had, just a real piece to it where I went, I know this works. If I just do more of what works, sort of like Alex Hormozy-esque of like, you don't need to do different things. This one thing that works usually over and over and over again. Like how many times do you have to do something before it's unreasonable that you get a sale or you get a win or whatever it is?
Yeah.
It was pretty much just that. Like I've done this with a good enough success rate that if I just keep doing it, there's no way I could lose.
Yeah.
And I just sort of felt that. And turns out I was right. I mean, not because, it's because of the Lord, not because of me, but yeah, it was an interesting, like, when it felt like I should be kind of freaked out.
This episode of Catholic Founders is sponsored by Fio, the streaming platform built for Catholic creators and audiences. Think Spotify, but exclusively with Catholic content. And you know what caught my attention about Fio is it's not just another streaming service. They're actually solving how Catholic business owners reach engaged, faithful Catholic audiences who are actively seeking content that's aligned with their beliefs. And right now they've got a very special offer. They're offering free advertising space for Catholic entrepreneurs. No risk and no commitment. This is your chance to reach Catholics that you cannot find anywhere else. Just head to fio.fm/ads. That's fio.fm/ads to sign up for this free advertising opportunity. The Fio app is available on iOS and Android, with web coming soon. All right, back to the show. Yeah, no, I could relate to that. I think it really comes down to if you're going to build a business. I think sometimes the idea of an entrepreneur is very, there's a stereotype that exists, not as much anymore, but there's a stereotype that exists, like somebody with a crazy idea who's going to like reinvent and change the world. It's like, okay, well, maybe. I'm not saying you shouldn't pursue those things, but when you can do a business like what I do, like recruitment or something like podcasting, there's a lot of people who make money doing this already. So there's plenty of like proof that it works, right? This is not reinventing the wheel, right? And I think this is something we can fall into, is thinking that we have to come up with something completely fresh and new. Yeah, maybe you could put a spin on it. Maybe you can do something slightly different than the competitors, but you still do something the same that people understand what it is, because otherwise they're going to have no idea, right? And this is what we have to do as responsible, fathers and husbands. Like, we have to provide for the family, so we need to do something that actually makes sense on paper, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's right.
Yeah. What about so a lot of people, nowadays it's like it seems like everybody has a podcast, but you're starting a podcast production studio or kind of agency here. Why start one? What are your thoughts generally on like the podcasting industry? Like, why should more people have them? I'm going to assume you think more people should have podcasts based on what you're doing. So like, give me your take.
I think there's a couple of, when I talk to people about this, I usually outline a couple of standard benefits of starting. And now I don't think everyone needs one. I talk, it's funny you should say that. I had somebody DM me on LinkedIn recently and be like, hey, I'm thinking about starting a podcast for this retreat center. Like, what do you think about that? And I was just like, I don't think you need one. Because I looked at his stuff and I was like, dude, I mean, we could talk about it, but I think you'd be better served updating your website and committing to your social media, your short form content, and maybe, filming mini doc style testimonials or something like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think there are definitely places where people don't need it. I think more people than not benefit from it, certainly. But I think there are definitely some people who should avoid our services because they'll get bad use of their money. That said, I think the biggest benefit tends to be trust, especially if you're somebody who stands to make a decent amount on one closed sale. And I mean, really, I'm using that liberally. Maybe if your ticket item is at least a couple $100, $300, I think you make enough, assuming your profit margins are good. I think you make enough for a podcast to make sense because people are buying a high enough ticket item that they want to trust you. I always say people want to do business with their friends. They would rather do business with their friends. Most of their friends work for other people. Therefore, the next best thing is people want to do business with brands and individuals they trust and they have some level of relationship with. And I think a podcast is probably the best medium. I think a video podcast, rather, is the best medium for trust. An audio podcast, also great separately. But, there is something about the, like we say in TV, sight, sound, motion, emotion of video those four things really do build trust. And so getting your audience to spend an hour a week with you, you're not going to sell anything immediately. That's perfectly fine. You shouldn't try to, because people are going to smell that it doesn't work. But if they spend that much time with you, they will eventually, assuming you're providing something valuable in that it's educational or entertaining or thought-provoking or whatever your thing is, they will just look to you when whatever you're selling is a thing they need, whether that's, insurance or a piece of tech or coaching, consulting, like whatever your thing is, assuming it's high enough ticket and a broad enough need that you could have an audience for it, they're going to pick you because they know you in a way they don't know your competitors. I think that is the biggest thing, is just time builds trust, and podcasts get people to spend time with you. You build, and you can make an argument that, like, well, it's parasocial and there are some problems with that. And there can be. I'm not saying there aren't, but I think for the most part, podcasts are fine. I think that's, you hear about that on occasion, but it's one of those things that as long as you're intentional about it, I think you're fine.
Does it have to be in your opinion, do you think it has to be in like a really particular niche, or can somebody do something in a place where there's already a lot of other people working on it, but you just have like a bit of a spin? Because I can imagine like this all works if you can get the people to show up and listen, right?
Yeah, no. As with most things, you do need people to pay attention to it and customers to buy it. I think I'm not going to say you can't win here without being in a niche. I'm not going to say that. But it's a lot harder if you, it's just like anything, right? If you have an audience you want to sell to and a niche that's not particularly crowded, you're going to have a much better chance of success than an audience you want to sell to in a really crowded niche. That's just how it works. That said, I'll say this, you have to have a spin. Like, you have to have a thing. It doesn't have to be hyper niche. You don't have to have a podcast for Gen X teachers who want to transition out of private education and into stuff. Like, you don't have to be that specific, but you might want to make a podcast.
That sounds like an Alex Hormozy.
Honestly, you might want to make a podcast for teachers transitioning out of education who want to move into sales. Something like that. Like, hey, here's how to take all the benefits, like all the skills that you have as a teacher. Let's use them because you've already got a lot to transfer. Let's show you how to, one, pitch your skills as they do transfer, and two, where to look for jobs, where to look for ins, whatever, where to look for a foot in the door. Something like that, I think, works because it's niche enough, but not excessively.
The offer makes sense, right? The offer
exactly.
to them, like, it's clear, like, oh, this is meant for me, right? And it could even outdo somebody who may be in a broader space with a bigger show. Like, this can outdo them because it's more particular to that person. And I think it's also important. I oftentimes tell people this. I'm a big proponent of content, so I'm not trying to ask you this to poke at it. I actually think most people should. More people should start podcasts, and more people should do content, even if you're not planning on being a business owner, because I think that there's so many, there's so much value that you get from like you said, the trust piece, and just the content out there, kind of increasing your surface area for luck, right, in your career. But I really believe that if you can have a really particular thing, you don't need thousands of listeners to actually have a valuable podcast, right? Because the podcast can be a way to meet people. And even outside of just meeting people, then even if you only have like a couple hundred very loyal people listening, that can be sufficient for your business, right? Depending on what kind of business you're running, especially if it's a high ticket item. So now I definitely am bullish on it. It was more of a trick question because I foresee that there being still a lot of opportunity in the space. Obviously, that there's like big shows, and those are going to continue to be big because I think there's a compounding effect. Unless they have a scandal or something. Sure. But I am curious, when you started your business, or I should say when you quit, you went solo, right? Again, what was your confidence level in general with the business, and how did that change over time, kind of seeing how God works and brings you work at everything?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think my confidence level was decent, mostly because I'd been self-employed before. So many people will, I'm sure, relate to this. You think back and you go, oh man, if only I knew then what I know now. Like, if only I got a do-over on, whatever that is. It's one of those things of I kind of got a do-over. I'd been a freelancer for, I think, 4 years or so. So I managed to sustain an income, keep a roof over my head, do half decent, nothing crazy, but, perfectly fine. And kind of flamed out on that. I pretty much got a do-over. So I went, oh man, I know so much more this go around. And I'd learned a bunch from working at the agency and then doing the sales gig for a bit. Like I picked up a lot in a, relatively short time period. So I went, great. I went out, I did these couple of jobs. I learned a bunch of stuff really quickly that I probably wouldn't have been able to pick up on my own, or at least not as fast. And also I get to draw on, my 4 years or so of previous self-employment. I know so much more now starting than I did the first go around. So my confidence was pretty good because I had a good foundation. Failure is helpful. Like I failed at being a freelancer long term. I succeeded for a while, but eventually just couldn't hack it. And because of all that, it was good. I bet I can do this because I've done it before when I was much dumber. Not that I'm wildly good at what I do now, but I'm light years ahead of where I was in 2021 when I started. I think that alone was helpful. Just going, I bet I can do this. That's the mental thing is probably 2/3 of the battle, and getting customers, finding your offer, and all that. Yeah, that's important. I was not saying it's not, but just going, I bet I can do this, and it's going to be fine, is so much harder than just making a sale or finding your customer. I think at least for most people, maybe some people would just come by it real naturally and crush it. But I think for most people, that mental game is much harder. And so I went, I bet I can do this. And it just kept working. And I was like, God, I'm not even sure I want to do this. I went, this is fine, which is a hilarious thing to say about your own company. But I just went like, this thing is fine. It's all right. I like the work well enough. I love podcasts. I really strongly believe in media. Like of all things, I'm a big believer above all else in the medium of podcasting. I enjoy the work. I enjoy the people we work with, but above all, I love the medium. And I just went, okay, I know I like podcasts, but do I really want to do this? And it just kind of kept working. And I went, I don't know if I want to do this, but a guy clearly wants me to do this for some reason. I don't think it's to make any earth-shattering changes. I think it's mostly just to feed my family and, help people make good content that is beneficial to them and their families and the people they listen to. That's not a particularly lofty goal, but a perfectly good one. I think that's probably all I'm ever going to amount to. And if that's the case, that is fine with me. I think that's a life well lived. And so I just went, for some reason, I'm supposed to keep doing this because it keeps working. When I keep asking God to crush it, if it just doesn't, just destroy it, if I'm not supposed to do it, and it just kept going and it kept building. And I just went, I don't really understand why I'm supposed to do this. Maybe it's just to make money for my family. And if that's the case, great. Let's do it. But yeah, the fact that it just kept compounding only increased the confidence that I had something that was, valuable enough, niche enough that people would pay for it, that no one else was really doing it. And I think something that should be done because, the people we serve do need this help, whether it's because they don't have the technical acumen or they don't have the time or, they have goals beyond their skill set because their skill set is in something else, whatever it is. And we're still here. So, we're expanding. Yeah. So I think the confidence is only growing. But yeah, getting past that first hurdle of going, I bet this will work. Like that's what I tell everybody who, wants to work for themselves. I'm like, that's the biggest thing. If you can do that, then just figuring out what you actually do beyond that it's easier.
I also think it's interesting. You didn't necessarily say this in what you're just saying there, but this idea that if we are diligent workers and employees and we try to really apply ourselves to whatever we're doing, we will become skilled enough to be able to go on our own with most things, right? Not all things. Yeah. Most jobs, especially most white collar work, I think you can easily turn that into your own thing where you're providing for your family and you have all the benefits. And I think this is the dilemma that I sometimes run into with people who I'm always trying to convince people to become entrepreneurs, right? That's kind of my thing. But it's like, hey, they just see it as risk. And I say, well, it's not really that risky because if you are actually really good at your skill set and you've developed it and you've worked hard to become good and you've used your skills in a good way, then you have more control over the outcome than if you're working with another company, because they could just do layoffs anytime now, right? And especially at the advent of
Yeah.
AI, there's
Mhm.
going to be plenty of jobs that people will, private equity firms are just going to say, hey, we can save, 2% or get 2% more
Mhm.
ROI. We're going to get rid of, thousands of people of jobs. Like, okay, wow, that's
Yeah.
crazy. We shouldn't be doing that. So I definitely encourage people to just really lean in. I think it's Andreas Widmer's book, the Art of Principled Entrepreneurship, talks about
Mhm.
this, right? You don't even have to be an entrepreneur to have this mentality. You can do it internally, but you have to really take ownership, basically, right? Hey everyone, quick interruption. I have something really, really exciting I want to share with you. We are announcing a sponsorship partnership with Verso Jobs. These guys are absolutely incredible at helping Catholic founders to hire people who are actually aligned with their mission. They have built this really, really incredible gamified and data-driven job platform that helps you hire people who actually share your mission and values. The best part is it's built by Catholics. Whether you're hiring for your startup, school, parish, or nonprofit, Verso makes it easy to find mission-aligned talent ready to build the kingdom. Just visit versojobs.com to get started. That's Verso, V-E-R-S-O jobs.com to get started. All right, back to the show. I do want to ask you about this idea of size and scale, right? So I think
Mhm.
a lot of people who are in the secular world want to build something just huge. They want to have a big exit, want to make tons of money. How do you visualize your goals of building the business? How big do you want to build it, and why? And what are the caveats that go along with that?
Yeah. I as we've grown, we've experienced some pretty good growth just over the last 6 weeks alone. I've thought about this a good bit. Have you seen the show The Bear on Hulu?
Mm-mm. No,
Oh
but
man,
somebody else just referenced
it's
it.
I'm sure enough of your listeners have that this won't land flat. You should. It's a phenomenal show. One of my favorite shows of all time. The newest season, the very short of it is, if you're not familiar, they run a restaurant. There's a fine dining area, and there's also a short order, like not table service, but like grab and go, like sandwich shop. And the fine dining is breaking even, maybe making a little money by the end of the season. This isn't a spoiler, but the sandwich shop is crushing it, and they have a 200 square foot maybe footprint. And the guy who runs the sandwich shop brings in a consultant, and the consultant tells him to think small because he's trying to figure out, how do I make more money with the sandwich shop? Like, how do we expand? Like, we're already at capacity. Like, we don't have any more room to put more ovens or put more people in there. And he goes, well, you don't need to. You just need to think small. Now, his thing is, you need to think small and then franchise it and make a bunch of them, which is not the conclusion I'm coming to. But it really struck me, ironically enough, for just being a kind of funny show. Like, it really struck me. Yeah, I would like to think smaller rather than larger. I would much rather have smaller growth that's sustainable and go, okay, I don't I don't really have a strong goal of making, 1-2 million ARR or something like that. Like, I don't really care. If that happens, cool. That's fine, because it'll happen on my terms. I mean, it'll happen on God's terms, but like it'll be intentionally built where it's like, okay, yeah, we do this revenue, but it's because I've expanded the team and now we provide good jobs and I have enough time to spend with my family and all of that. It'll be more so that I really, at some point, you grow and you have to put systems and then subsystems in to support those systems as your
Mhm.
scaffolding, of the company grows. And, it's like you just are solving problems that you've created. And now that may not be a bad thing. It may be because you're growing and it's good for whatever you do that you grow. I'm not saying growth is bad, but I think unintentional growth is bad. Like, growth for growth's sake. Like, I want to build a business to build a business to have a $50 million exit, or whatever the case may be. That's bad. But growing the business isn't bad, as long as I think you're intentional about it. At some point, it's like, oh, I have to, have a giant complicated CRM, and I need AI agents, and I need contract workers and part-time and full-time. Like, maybe I'm not even saying that's bad, but I might also just be able to run this with a team of 5. And if I can do that, and my team is paid well, and I make enough money, and we all get to spend an appropriate time with our our families and, practice our faith in the workplace and things like that, that's fine. Like I do not have a desire to grow it for its own sake. If it
Hmm.
happens, the Lord's will be done, great. And if it doesn't, and it just makes enough for me and then the contractors I currently use, great. That's fine. It's all
Yeah, I think
God's. If he
this is
wants to
a
destroy it, that's fine. If he wants to grow it, that's
exactly.
fine. Like, we'll just see.
Yeah, I think this is a I guess you could say like a characteristic I think that we should pretty much all Catholic entrepreneurs should embody, right? It's good to have, growth objectives, I think, to an extent. I talked to Jeff
Sure.
Sheffelbein about this at one point, and he's a big proponent of, hey, the Bible tells us to plan and to be frugal and just really be intelligent about things. But I personally have had this over the past year where it's like, hey, I wanted to hit a certain revenue target. I'm probably going to do about half of that this year. But I'm like, okay, I'm still paying the bills and I'm actually like making a little extra money than I need to so I can put some savings away. Like this is actually
Yeah.
pretty great. And I I don't want to add some random stress to my life about, oh man, I missed the number. Like that's what stressed me out when I used to work for another recruitment company because I had to hit their numbers. And I was like,
Mhm.
I don't want to do that, right? I can still like enjoy my daily mass routine and all these items because I'm not super stressed about that. But the team is being paid, we keep getting work, and it just seems like anytime there's a lull, God brings a little bit more, right? And sometimes when there's too much, He takes it away. It's just like, okay, perfect. Now I'm not stressed again, right? I'm not saying
Yeah.
there's no stress in the business, but just this idea
Sure.
of growing the business as it comes and recognizing that it may grow bigger, but we just do this for the right purposes. We do this for our family. We're not here trying to make all the money. I think probably most of the people who come on the show are probably initially mostly motivated by the freedom of entrepreneurship and the ability to spend time with family. I can't if somebody's listening to this and is not an entrepreneur yet, I would just encourage you to realize that the actual benefit of having complete control of your time is it's worth way, way, way more than most salaries will ever pay you. And this is like a super underrated piece of being an entrepreneur, I think, especially if you haven't done it before. You don't realize um, the benefit of it.
It's true.
Yeah,
Yeah. I,
yeah. I
I
also,
always say that, like, your time is your greatest asset. I was talking to a buddy of mine who
mhm.
was thinking about working for himself, ended up just getting a really good job offer that changed his quality of life. So good for him. And I was like, yeah, your time is your biggest asset. If you have that, even if you don't have money, you have all of your time. Now you have 40, 50, 60 hours a week just to go find money. And if you do it correctly, eventually you will. But you need your time to do that. Like, you need ownership over your time, even though you'll end up working more and it'll be more stressful in a lot of ways, at least up front.
But also being self-employed or being an entrepreneur on your own, to an extent, forces you to develop virtue or skills, I guess you could say. It's not necessarily virtue, but it forces you, if you are diligent, to kind of like learn how to be better, learn how to manage your
Mhm.
finances
Yeah.
properly, right? If you're paying attention, right? And again, a lot of people don't. I think that there's also an older generation of business owners that were just like, hey, we're just doing this because it's the thing, it's going like, and they accept the struggle as something that's going to be there forever rather than figuring out
Yeah.
systems to improve it, right? And I think that it will be very different this century with just the resources available, and it'll be so much easier to build nice systems, and most people will be aware of this, right? I just find it fascinating that so many people don't even use ChatGPT or any AI tools right now to like learn things, right? It's not even about doing the work. It's just about if you don't know something, you can get very educated on things very quickly. What has, I guess, has there been any specific growth or change in your relationship with your faith or with God through the freelance stuff and through entrepreneurship that you've experienced?
Yeah. It's something I've been thinking a lot about the Lord's Prayer in terms of entrepreneurship, especially like, give us this day our daily bread. There is something, especially, and thanks be to God, we're doing better now than when we started. But there was definitely a time where I was like, okay, I know I can get us making enough money where we get close to covering expenses. And I went, okay, I know that I'm kind of like teetering on a knife's edge. If I lose any of them, it's going to be tough. But I'm making near enough already. And it was one of those things. Okay, I wake up and I pray I can close a deal or at least pay the bills. And, God has certainly provided for us. All we have is His, and He's very generous steward of it for us. Yes, I do the work, and I've done this for a number of years, so I have enough knowledge, enough skills, and all that. Sure, that's true, and I'm not saying I'm not doing anything, but I really am just purely relying on God for our daily bread in a way you're not when you work for somebody else. But I think entrepreneurship just live it out more because it's closer to you, like it is right in front of your face. But yeah, it was this really powerful reminder that like everything we have is God's, and He could take, the Lord gives and the Lord taketh away. He could take it away, but he keeps giving generously. Yeah, I mean, we're not doing crazy well, but we have no right to be doing as well as we are this early on. Like it's just God going, hey, what you're doing is good. Also, you got a family. Let me kind of hook it up for you. Make sure that they don't starve. Keep your kid in diapers. It's a very powerful reminder of just how little control we have, and that we have to do our part because that's what's right and just and what we're called to. But there is so much out of our control. Like my largest client could just die tomorrow. Heck, all my clients could die. It seems real unlikely, but like it's not impossible.
Thanos snap.
Like all of this could come crashing down tomorrow, and there's nothing I can do about it, which is terrifying, but at the same time very comforting, because if you do the math of like, would I rather my family rely on me or God? It's like, I don't want them relying on me. But there's only one of us like keeping the world spinning, and it's not me, and I'm very glad it's not. So yeah, it's just this reminder to let go of I think it's pride at the end of it, like the desire to control things that you just can't control and ought not to try. All you have to do is your part, and God provides the rest, and you just have to have the docility of spirit to say, this is going to happen to me, and there's a reason for it, and I'm going to praise God in the good times and bad, and we're just going to make it work because clearly this is the Lord's will, even though I don't know why. So yeah, it's been it's easy to say in the good times, well, check back in the bad ones, but yeah, and it's just been this very powerful reminder of just how little control I have, which is something I'm definitely naturally inclined to pride. It's certainly one of my given sins, and this has been helpful for that.
Yeah, no, I definitely have found that too. It's like I was just actually reflecting on this yesterday because the podcast is growing pretty well right now, and I was like, just kind of like beating my chest a little bit, and then I was like taking a walk for my roach, and I was like, oh, oof. I had never felt like quite the conviction because this is like the only venture I've done that's like purely Catholic in nature, and it was just pretty interesting where I realized for the first time like I had been pretty prideful about it, and it's like, hey, I was taking credit in my head for the growth, right? But in the end, like this is definitely not, and I had never felt such conviction about pride in that way. It's an interesting experience that entrepreneurship will definitely humble you in a certain way, right? I'm curious. So, have you ever thought about this idea of? We've been talking about this in the community a lot right now, in the paid community, of the idea of divine providence, kind of basically setting out like a set or an environment that you're created, you're born into, and you have these family in this place of time, and it ends up kind of creating not a path for you, but the environment in which you're trying to find the clues to what your calling in life is. I think on the career side, I also career aspect of this, I think about the fact that young people, before you're 20, let's say before you're like 26, like it can be very difficult for most people, or even for many people before you're 30, to understand how to steer their career. So they kind of just drift to an extent, and they kind of stumble around, which is, one hand you're like, oh, that's not very intentional. But on the other hand, it's maybe the way God designed it, because he's maybe like preparing you kind of like, a specific journey or the scratches or scars or experiences you're going to have so that you're prepared for the next thing, right? And I think for you, I look at your kind of your story and I wonder, hey, did you intentionally choose these paths of being a freelance and being in media, or did it kind of happen to you, and then as a result it set you up really nicely to be able to build this business? And then maybe you don't know it now, but maybe if you keep thinking about it in a year or two or three, you'll start to realize, oh wow, like there's a particular objective or purpose that I have that's much bigger than just building this business. Maybe there's something more than that, and all of my past experiences have set me up for that. This is the thing I try to think about.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I can actually I can do the sort of path tracking pretty well. Like I got to where I am right now because of, at least as far back as I can see, and then see the actions. Maybe it was further. To some degree, actually, I got where I was going because of when I was in the 5th grade. I went to like camp at the university I ended up going to. So like maybe you could start it there. But probably the path for me starts freshman year of college. Freshman year of college, I took a job, just happenstance, at on campus, and I worked in a specific department on the office that handled post-grad volunteering. I did a terrible job my first year and got fired. But yeah, I was terrible. I was mad at the time. Years later, I'm like, oh, yeah, 100%. But there was a guy who headed another department in that same entity who went, okay, you can come on my team. Like, here's some stuff you can do. And because of Tom King, everyone called him TK, great man, the greatest man I know. He just gave me a job, and I got to know him over the next few years. I worked it out. I was a freshman in college. I had my problems. I worked it out. But because of him, I knew about the sort of post-grad program I ended up doing that got me in radio. And, sort of down the line, I worked some jobs, moved my way around, ended up having to go home. My parents moved out here. I followed them and ended up staying because the economy turned down and I didn't really know what I was doing. I eventually met my wife. I bought a home. We have a kid now. It's crazy to look back and just see the path behind you. Cause what's the, oh gosh, I think it's maybe the prayer of St. Francis. I think it's somebody, Lord, let me not see the path ahead, one step enough for me. I think it's Francis. Like that really is it. And I'm terrible about this. So I try to pray it often because I'm like, no, I want to see the path ahead. Like, don't give me the next step. Like, let me see what's going on. So I try to remind myself to do that. But looking back, I go, oh, wow. Like you brought me here for a reason. Like all of this stuff has built up to where I am now. So who knows what's going to happen, another 5 years down this path. It's enough to go, okay, you know better than I do. I never could have picked this for myself. Mm-hmm. Clearly, 5 years down the path I can't see is even better. Even if I'm in a worse situation for whatever reason, like it is even better than it is now, which is terrifying and comforting.
Yeah, because God keeps leading you, right? I think there has to be a sort of healthy mixture between trying to figure out, okay, what's the trajectory of the path from behind me towards the front? Like if I take it from behind and I project it ahead, what does that look like? There's some of that, but also I think maybe more so the focus should be on, based off of what I've done in the past, what is the thing I'm supposed to do right now? Because we do live in the now. We don't know that tomorrow is not guaranteed, right? But if we take it seriously, take it very, very seriously, like what do I have now based on the path and everything? What can I do today? And the episode that I believe will have come up right before this was with Tim Connors, and he was reciting this encyclical by Benedict, Caritas Veritate, about loving your neighbor and solving your neighbor's problems to the greatest extent you can, using the influence in the world that you have. And this has really stuck with me ever since that recording. Just the ability to, whether it's small or large, not ignoring the influence you do have and really pushing the limits of helping live that second greatest commandment of love your neighbor. So I think that's something we have to keep noodling on. But I do want to cover a couple more things before we run out of time. One is, I'm curious, I think by now you've got to work with some pretty interesting people. So I'm curious if you have any cool stories of the people you've worked with, or just anything you want to share on that front.
Yeah, I mean, we've definitely got to do some fun stuff. We've took on a couple of podcasts recently. The most interesting one probably is Exodus 90. They have a podcast, Desert Fathers, with Bishop Eric Varden. Bishop Varden is a fascinating guy. Oh my gosh. He just sounds so smart. He is smart, separate. He's clearly a genius. But just listening to him, you ever have like somebody, he's Norwegian, and like he just has this very and he sounds almost, he's got a voice of like a barrister. This is what I think of being, and he is so fascinating to listen to. So getting to do that is a ton of fun. Getting to do that work has been fun. We just took over the Catholic Psych Institute's podcast, Being Human, with Dr. Greg Pitaro, that we've had our longest running client. Big shout out to Catching Foxes. I've been producing, some of your listeners probably know who that is. I've been producing their podcast since well before St. Kolbe Studios, the last few years now. the guys over there make my life very hard, but they know it, so it's okay. Their erratic upload and recording schedule just drives me nuts, but it's always how they've been. I've gotten used to it. They're great guys. It's one of those things of at some point, and you probably experience this to some degree of you work with somebody long enough, whether it's a client or a coworker, even if they're remote, like you just become friends with them. Like I just genuinely care like about their good. And that's a cool experience of, yeah, you've given me money for the past few years to do a service for you, which, I appreciate. But it's a really neat experience of becoming friends in a qualified sense, just to a point where you really care about their good beyond I care about their good because, that makes them keep doing the podcast and that makes them pay me.
Of course.
Like that. But going beyond that, it's a very cool transition to kind of see yourself go through. Yeah, that's been great. One of my favorite things of doing what I get to do is stories like that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. No, I've started to experience this recently. It's actually kind of not the first time, but it's just a realization I had is that you want to be able to like, hey, just like hang out with your clients too, because it's much more than just business, right? And it's also so much more fun, right? Because you can joke around and stuff. Like for the first time, one of my clients was just like pulling my leg and told me fake bad news, and I was like, oh, no way. And he's like, no, I'm just kidding, man. And I was like, oh, this is actually cool that he feels comfortable doing that, right?
Yeah.
So I appreciated that. But one other thing I do want to touch on, then we can go to rapid fire, is what do you think is missing in Catholic media?
How much time? Now, that's a good question. Here's what I'll say. I don't think it's completely missing because I think we're on the upswing of it, but we're well behind high quality production. We are so far behind the secular world, even like, the Christian world at large. We are so far behind on high quality productions of all media. And, EWTN brings out good stuff. Like Exodus 90's podcast is really high quality. They're Bishop Barron, Ascension Press, like these things that like they're just phenomenal. Like they're top tier. And I think we're getting more of that. Spirit Juice, who are the guys out in Gettysburg? Oh my gosh, I'm blanking on their name. The Coronation Media. Yeah, like we have these nonprofits as well as these, private entities who are making incredible quality, but they are by far the exception, not the rule. Mm-hmm. And I think there's this weird, I think it's a hangover from when, probably when we're about the same age, probably when we were growing up into high school for us. I think it was all of that. And then post high school, it started to change there's this kind of allergic reaction to having good things in the church. And I mean that in like a liturgy war sense, though I do mean that separately. I harbor hidden opinions, but mostly I mean like having really nice things, good quality media, making money. We're kind of allergic to that because we think, oh, well, money is evil. And it's like, well, no, the love of money is the root of all evil. But we don't have to be losing all the time. And I think there was this sense that we're coming out of. I think there was this sense of, well, we can't get too big because then we'll fall into sin. No. I mean, maybe. Don't get me wrong. But like, no. You have to expand and become better. And now your responsibility just increases. Like, yes, you now have a much greater capacity for sin. That's true. You have greater influence. But now you have a much greater responsibility, and it's more difficult to not commit grave sin. I mean,
it's actually harder. It's harder to live up to it, right? So in a way, it's actually it's not necessarily laziness to not pursue it, but it's like you have to answer the call. Yeah, you have to answer the call. Like if you are called to be, I was just chatting with somebody offline about this idea that the 3 levels of humility from Ignatius about, the third level being you desire poverty. And we were like, well, what if there's a billionaire? Like, do there's possibility to be a billionaire, but who desires poverty? Because God kind of put their situation there that they have it, but they still desire this, right? Because that's how you desire to be more like Jesus, is to be despised or rejected by the world. I appreciate that. I think I can see what you're saying about the rejection of spending money, but at the end of the day, like if we really care about what we do, we should be doing it well. Like you
Oh
wouldn't
yeah.
have Saint Paul wouldn't be out there, kind of being like, oh no, it's okay. Like we're just gonna say more. Like you're like on fire, like lighting people up, in the synagogues or whatever, just so that like
Right.
no guys, this is not how it's going. And then he would do the best thing he can. If he was, if he was doing any of our jobs, like I think just for anybody listening, whatever you do, imagine if Saint Paul did that job. How would it look?
Yeah.
All right, try to imitate that. You can just imagine the fire. And if you don't know anything about St. Paul, definitely start reading some of his work and reading the Acts of the Apostles, and you'll understand pretty
Yeah.
quickly. Cool, man. Well, let's jump into rapid fire, and then we'll wrap it up. Who are these? Are there any particular scriptures that really inspire you from an entrepreneurial standpoint?
Yeah. I think my knee jerk is probably it's either the verse about the love of money being the root of all evil, because I think people really misinterpret that as just money being the root of all evil. And it's a reminder that you need to be detached from this, but it's fine to have it. It's either that or, St. Joseph of Arimathea giving the Christ his tomb after the crucifixion of, he was clearly a man of decent means, giving a large, a very large gift, something meant for him, which is another verse I love. So it's a toss up. It's one of those two.
Yeah, I will just like caveat and make a note there. I think that people underestimate how wealthy Joseph Arimathea was, because
Yep.
the fact that he could get an audience with Pilate and he was part of the Sanhedrin is like really big stuff, right? And also having that tomb in the first place, like that was effectively billionaire status at that time. And so anybody who's like saying that there's no good things that people can do, definitely think about that a little bit. I think I wrote about this a while ago. Who is an entrepreneur that really inspires you and why?
I That's a good. You know who I really have been impressed with lately? This is maybe a group answer, but the guys at Verso Jobs. I don't know if you've been following what they do.
Yeah,
Their thing is
I just
neat.
met Joe.
I think they're really funny. They're a younger Gen Z who I just don't quite understand, but I'm an older Gen Z, so they do make me feel old. But they're doing great stuff. I really like how they've completely rethought the process of applying for jobs and like no one else is doing it. Yeah, I think they're crushing it. I've been really enjoying watching them.
Okay, and then who are some of your favorite saints and why?
I mean, St. Kolbe certainly has to be up there. I mean, he's one of the most heroic things you can do is give your life for somebody else, especially someone with a family. He makes it. St. Philip Neri, my confirmation saint, the saint of patron saint of comedy or joy or mirth, depending on your translation. He, I think, embodied poverty of spirit really well. He didn't like talk down to himself in the way people are like afraid of pride. So they go, well, I have to make myself little. And like, that is true. People just, I think, misinterpret it. He goes, I know the opinion of other people is important, so I just don't want to be like, well, I don't care. Like he knows the opinion of other people are important, but he, because of that, wants to make himself less, wants to make himself, not taken seriously by others. I think he sort of properly walks that line of it's, wrong to not care about the opinions of others, but it's also wrong to care about, because, it's charity says you should to some degree care about other people's opinions, especially those immediately around you. But it's also wrong to make their opinions more important than God's opinion of you.
Yeah,
I think he walked that line in a really beautiful way. Those are both up there for me. I'm a
nice.
big fan.
And what is your favorite devotion, especially as an entrepreneur?
That's it's funny. I think this is considered a devotion, and it's not remotely related to entrepreneurship. It's the Office of the Dead. I love praying the Office of the Dead. We have a plug that will not be relevant to anyone unless they happen to live here. We, at the parish I go to, we've created, a few of my friends and I, a Purgatorian society. So we pray the Office of the Dead at the local cemetery every other Saturday, which we'll be going tomorrow. I love the Office of the Dead. I've gotten really into it.
Awesome, man. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on. Where should people reach you, and why should they reach you? Obviously you produce podcasts, but let's give your call to action here.
Yeah. If you have a podcast, you want to, promote it more, market it more, edit it at a higher level, we can do that. If you want to start a podcast but not do all the heavy lifting and you want to jump past the sort of growing pains of having an early podcast and DIYing it, those are the two big things we do. We build podcasts and then we edit, produce, and market them on the back end. The best way to reach us is stkolbestudios.com, all spelled out, SAINT, stkolbestudios.com. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. You can find our company page. We don't really do anything with that, but it is a way to find me via there. That's simpler than typing in Joe Coleman and hoping for the best. Joe at stkolbestudios.com. You can also send me an email. Those are, yeah, the website, or sending me an email, sending me a LinkedIn DM. All those are the places to get me.
All right, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to meet other Catholic entrepreneurs just like Joe to build alongside and to have camaraderie with, apply to join our paid community, the Catholic Founders Guild. We host regular meetups online and in person to learn from each other, help each other, and to do business with each other. It's $10 a month or $100 a year, so anyone can afford it. To get started today, go to our Substack and click Upgrade to Paid. Any tier will get you access to the community and the paywalled content. All right, we'll see you on the other side. Thank you so much for tuning in today. God bless you and happy building.